Hello everyone, we are entering 20s. Today with Denver Broncos, yet another playoff team that was one and done. And for those guys who've missed my Seahawks episode, obviously talking about the team of my heart, I encourage you to watch it because there was a lot of emotions. And I did not know at the time that Gino was being traded, which came as a shocker. But this is not an episode about Seahawks, so I'm not going into details. But I encourage you to watch it because if you would know that Denver is partially responsible for me even doing this series and loving American football, because if they didn't have their ass handled as much as they did against the Seahawks, I might not have had this really mean situation in which I lost money and I wanted to know much more about the sport on which I've lost some money and about the team that cost me in the Seahawks. So with that, let's find out how the Denver Broncos are entering 2025, how they fare in 2024. And as usual, we'll do it by starting with reviewing their draft year one, how they did. And we start with Bo Nix, and immediately you are going to see my grade D+, and you are going to be a moron, you fucked up. Well, yes and no. And before I will give my praises to Bo Nix, and there will be praises to Bo Nix, I will reiterate two of my points that were behind this grade, why this was so lower than general public was on Bo. And yeah, so with Bo Nix and this pick, first thing I was unhappy about, it really felt like at the point of the draft of Bo Nix, the teams that wanted to address QB, pretty much every single one of them, with the exception of the Giants, were already addressed that position. Now, whether we're talking Washington, whether we're talking Chicago, Pittsburgh addressed it with some stuff. It was almost kind of clear that, like I said, perhaps with the exception of Giants, there was not necessarily a team going to pick Bo Nix. So I really felt like there was a very nice opportunity to trade back towards late teens, early 20s and draft Bo Nix there. And you might say, well, is this a QB? We cannot screw it up. What if perhaps Giants can jump us there? I'm like, okay, that could have happened. They had 2 second-round picks, but in that case, I was still arguing this is not necessarily the best situation for a QB to enter, point one. And B, the thing is, because Russell Wilson trade did not work out as Denver hoped, you were facing around 80-90 millions in dead cap, and also you were not able to build the team as you would like in the last couple of drafts because you were missing some of the draft picks that you spent on Russell Wilson. So in that situation, I think as a GM, you need to be looking for these type of, I wouldn't say thin values, because this really feels like a good value if you could trade to 19 or 20, whatever, and still grab Bo Nix and have, let's say, another second round pick for you to spend. So that was my first critique of how they handled this, because like I said, I really felt like there was this opportunity given how the teams behind them and in front of them, pretty much I would say almost every QB room was set up at that point of time. So whether it was not there were not teams willing to give Broncos an interesting draft capital to trade, or whether they were not entertaining that idea, we will never learn, I guess. But given the fact that at this point there was 0 defensive players being off the board, I would guess that some teams could have been interested of really picking the best defensive player available for their system, for their team, and that was the situation to jump and trade with the Broncos. So we'll never know. That was my first critique. My second critique was about Bo Nix is an older prospect. To give you guys perspective, he's only 7 months or 8 months younger than Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, the Trevor Lawrence that already has 5 years of experience in the league. And with that being said, I was always on the side that I feel like Bo Nix is going to function, and he's going to function very well with Sean Payton, that this is a really good match. So I wasn't afraid that he would be a bust for the Broncos, that he would not play good. My afraid comes from the fact that he might be good, but not necessarily having an upside of like a top 10, top 7 QB. And that, to me, that still holds, because as much as there were stretches of games when he showed this potential, I felt like they were against like really bottom defenses, like the Panthers, for example. And in other games, it really felt like he's going to be solid for several years to come. I don't see him really stepping it up to an amazing starter level, which is something that I really want my QB to be in order to pay him. And I know this might be like 3 years ahead of the schedule talking about this, but as a GM, I feel, or as an owner of the team, I feel like you need to consider that. With that, like this year's draft, and especially Shedeur Sanders, made me thought about, well, what if GMs went about this differently and were like, okay, if we can get quite cheap, because on rookie deals the quarterbacks are insanely cheap compared to when they pay them, a guy that perhaps year 2, year 3, year 4 will become like 14 to 20th best QB in the league, and we will be paying 10 million for that. That sounds like a great value that we can build a really strong team around. And then if he hits and becomes like much more than that, then we pay him. If he doesn't, how about we don't pay him? I'm like not inclined to believe that that is on some GM's mind, because I kind of never saw that happen. You know, team that has like semi-competent QB and letting him go. But if that would be a case, I feel like Bo Nix and perhaps this year Shedeur Sanders are actually nice examples of how this could really work out for the benefit of the franchise. That, you know, if you have an average QB on really cheap deal, you can build a championship roster around that guy. And I feel like Bo Nix could be exactly the type of a guy that this can happen around, especially with Sean Payton. So I still don't believe that there is a top 7 QB upside with him, and that was kind of my second concern about him. And I feel like it will eventually lead to a bad decision by the Broncos franchise. But, you know, perhaps I could be wrong about both. Like, perhaps they will think about the situation much more in terms of like, we saw Sam Darnold, we saw Baker Mayfield, we saw Geno Smith, these guys that if they were put into right environment, we can get almost like a top 10 QB out of these guys for cheap, because we're paying them for 1 year bridge type of money. There is an influx of really great QBs from the university, so from the college. So perhaps people will start to think about like, well, we have the 15th best QB in the league. Let's not give him $60 million a year. Let's not do that. If that's going to be the case, great. I just have never seen that. And my scare that is that Bo Nix is going to be something like Derek Carr. You know, good player, but a guy that you should not be paying. I hope it's not going to happen. And now, towards the positive side, I feel like Bo Nix was better than I expected him to be year 1. He was better than I laid a floor for him. I thought like he's going to become a decent starter in the year. Everything's going to run smoothly, but not necessarily great. There were times when he looked great. So, you know, great for him. This is something that I kind of expected him to reach like in year 2. The question about stepping it up from here, it still remains for me. So for now, the grade would have to go higher. It would probably have to be like B to B minus, because my 2 big things are still there. But he definitely outplayed what I thought of him as a year 1 QB. And credit to Bo, like he did not fold it after 2 weeks when there was like heavy scrutiny. I'm like, just guys, come on, give him time. I was like sad for him. Like it was obviously nice to beat Denver's asses as Seattle, but I was sorry for the amount of criticism that Bo faced, because people were like, "Oh my God, this should have been like this prospect that doesn't make mistakes. What is he doing? What the dumb throws?" Just gave it time, and Bo Nix emerged. So I was never like panicking on him, but at the same time, I'm just not on the hype train of like believing that Bo Nix could be anything better than the third best QB in this division, which is like the third concern. You have Patrick Mahomes and you have Justin Herbert, two guys that, to me, Patrick is an elite category, of course, and Justin is an amazing starter category. If you have a guy that's not on the same level as them, it's harder, much harder to compete, because these guys are great. So those things still stand, but kudos to Bo Nix. He played really, really well. Their second pick in Yona Ellis, I feel like my grade kind of stands. He showed some good stuff. He was the one of the pieces that they have on the line, and they are able to really utilize like the multitude of players, not necessarily any like superstar there, but a lot of guys that have slightly different skill set that they can match with the good matchups for them. I felt like Ellis benefited from that, and he did not necessarily step it up like superbly, but it was a solid rookie season for this young lad. Not necessarily anything great, but very solid. Where they left a lot to be desired was Troy Franklin. I really thought like this pick was a steal. Like I didn't know why he's still there early in fourth round. And especially like connecting him with Bo Nix, this felt like really, really great situation for the Broncos. They had chemistry from college, and there was a place for him on the roster. It was not like they had like plethora of great receivers. They had Cortland Sutton, they just traded Jerry Jeudy, they released Tim Patrick. Not necessarily that those roles are what Troy Franklin is, but still, like there is more snaps to be had with these guys gone. And Troy, and what was like more concerning when I watched the tape and when I like was specifically Troy, it was like he was getting open. I felt like decently well, but the timings, and I would say from his side, not necessarily from both sides, were not necessarily there. Sometimes the hands was not there, so it's not like I feel like he cannot reappear, cannot like earn starter job in the future, but definitely there was some stuff missing year one. And where they absolutely stole an insane value was Devon Valley, where they released Tim Patrick, and especially Tim Patrick that actually emerged to be healthy for once, which really like a sad story for Tim. He's a great player. Unfortunately, injuries like absolutely derailed his career. And I was kind of surprised because he was supposed to be healthy, and he actually was for Detroit, especially like for his standards. I was like, okay, you've traded Jeudy, you released Tim Patrick, and you've drafted a QB, so perhaps you want to give him weapons. And we're like, no, we're going with the 7th round rookie. And I'm like, okay. But dude, Devon Valley was the replacement of Tim Patrick, really similar body type of wide receiver, and he freaking delivered. Like, was he absolutely amazing? But for a seventh round rookie, he was special. And I think there is more to be unlocked and unleashed with this young man. As I will compliment this team, like a roster building, with how much they spent on Russell Wilson, and it obviously didn't pan out. They needed to find some great players, not through the draft, but also through some undrafted players. And even this year, DeAndre Tillman, I would say, was put again in situations that absolutely suit what he is good at, and he very, very nicely succeeds. So great find for an undrafted player to play, close to 300 snaps and be very, very meaningful and like very visible in these snaps. Like he was not just out there, he was making plays. So good find. Where they left like their production year one, kind of liked was this duo of Chris Abrams-Drain and Ulrich Estime. With both guys, I expected them to have an input year one, but neither of them played over 150 snaps. It's not like they've looked poorly in them, like especially Chris Abrams-Drain got 2 starts and looked very solid in them, so I would not, I do expect him to have a bigger role year 2, but year 1, neither of them were necessarily contributors that I've expected. So that was the draft, and now let's move towards the offense recap. So with the offensive recap, we will start with Bo Nix, and like I said, he was better than I gave him credit to be year 1. Was there something like special that he was better at that? I would say not necessarily. He was just like slightly better in a lot of areas. But 2 things that I want to like enhance. One, it was like mental fortitude to not cave in after a lot of criticisms after like 2 weeks where he looked dreadful. He made a lot of mistakes. So he did not fold, and he managed to turn it around. And I would say, I don't even know, but not many people do understand how much of a pressure there is on a QB in the NFL, like how many shit this guy needed to read after those couple of games. So kudos to him for that. And the second part would be perhaps a little bit underestimated him as an athlete, as a runner. And what came to mind when he was running out there was that he was not necessarily just running to run, but he was able to really keep his vision and sometimes like make nice throws on the run, which is not necessarily something I like entrusted him to have as good as he did year 1. So credit to Bo Nix. He was playing as around 20 to 18 best QB in the league for this year. Can he keep it up? Can he improve that? To me, he probably is going to keep it up. Will it improve it? We will see. I hope for the Broncos' sakes he will. And I like once again, I will absolutely happily be wrong about prospects. Like for 99.9% of the guys, I root for them, root for their careers. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Let's go. I will gladly be wrong. Now, yet another part of kind of untold like praise for Bo Nix is there was not necessarily like super crazy player situation to work with. Like in terms of running backs, we expected big year from Jarrell McLaughlin. Did not happen. Javonte Williams, kind of looked semi-back, but definitely not as good as he was like year 1. And there's a reason why they did not extend him, at least so far. So this room was there was not any back that they could really rely on, whether it's to give him some explosive plays or some like tough yardage. It really felt like they are underwhelming. They are slightly behind the schedule with these guys. Not necessarily like super behind. They were still functioning room. It was not a dreadful room, but compared to almost every other room out there, they were not as good as they. And the same thing I feel like you can say about this wide receiver core, because Cortland Sutton on his own is a very, very good wide receiver, but he should be your high end too, not necessarily your 1 in my opinion. I don't think he's top 15 wide receiver in the league. And then like next to him, it was kind of wide receiver by committee. And here, that's once again like I'm going to shift the talk towards this coaching staff and Sean Payton, because the system that is in place, it really can, like, let's say, make it work with less. They are very, very good in putting right guys towards the right routes, towards the right spots, enhancing their like great sides and trying to hide their weaknesses, which is really, really impressive, because on individual talent basis, beside O-line, we will cover that, but on individual talent basis, this is one of the worst offenses in the league. It's that, like, just on individual basis. but as a unit, with the O-line that we will talk about that is really good, it managed to function as, I would say, an average offense, which by players just should not be possible given how much talent is out there. So, whether it's Marvin Mims really being your deep threat, absolutely able to scheme him open for several nice situations, kind of winning this internal battle with Troy Franklin, unfortunately not able to hold for the whole season. I would say the major part of it. He was playing all 18 weeks, but he never became like that superstar deep threat that you kind of have to have him out there for every single snap. Devon Valley really replacing Tim Patrick as this big-bodied wide receiver that has a really sure hand and can secure a lot of things for you. And Cortland Sutton as your biggest threat. And then it was Troy Franklin, it was little Jordan Humphrey. He had another player that was brought here specifically to work with Sean Payton, kind of his favorite, but he understands what little Jordan Humphrey is. And I would really compare this to Bill Belichick's defenses. I have this high praise on Sean Payton because as much as I didn't like how he handled situation with Russ, and I'm biased obviously towards Russell last year, but I would say even New York offense would probably be on side of Russ in that dispute, but whatever. I do have to give him a shit ton of credit of how he can scheme up his offenses, how he really is able to put everyone towards what they are supposed to be doing and really enhancing their strength. So really, really nice job of this scheme. And that's why, this turn from Russell Wilson to Bo Nix was kind of always written in the sky when Sean Payton took over Denver, because what Sean Payton was and needs from his QB is, you need to play on time. I will scheme you guy open, you will hit him, that's it. Don't play hero most of the time. And you will have solid protection, we will have a really good line, and you just need to really thread the needle, and we will give you enough space to do it. What Russell Wilson is, I would say, is much more of a playmaker with, let's give me a bunch of other playmakers that I can throw my deep balls to, or they can make plays for me. They can really be good at scramble drills. I don't necessarily need that good of an O-line. Let's make it much more about me. Which can work. It worked for several years in Seattle. But that's not what Sean Payton necessarily expects from his QB. Even Drew Brees, who was the superstar, it was always about doing bunch of things really, really well, not necessarily really on structure. So that's where this always kind of had this divorce written in the sky. And despite there was some uproar with Broncos, in the time that the things really got ugly with Russell Wilson last year, it was kind of always inevitable. So with that being said, on individual basis, these guys are not great. They are decent, they are good. Cortland Sutton is a good wide receiver or a great one. But on individual basis, I'm really happy for Devon Valley. Marvin Mims have a really good season for him. But it's not those guys scare me if I'm a defensive coordinator. It's going to be very interesting if now, when there is some money to be spent around, if they can really improve the system, just for example, Arizona is trying to do, it's absolutely different systems, but what they've gotten with Marvin Harrison is a guy that really demands attention from the defense. So if you can get this guy towards this offense, whether it's tight end, whether it's wide receiver, probably should be wide receiver, it suddenly demands that, maybe we can match good with this scheme, because we do not necessarily expect guys beating us one-on-one if we have a quarter of an extra coverage on him. But suddenly now there is a guy that probably demands double team on half of the snaps. And suddenly you cannot have this security cover, if against the system. You need to trust your guys really to one-on-one, or really not to get out scheme. And that's where I feel like Sean Payton's genius could shine even more. If there is this one guy that really demands defenses to focus on him, so there your system has an advantage on pretty much every snaps because like this one guy is taking like 1.5 guy off the defense, and I can like really scheme up like my guys 4 against 3.5 or like 4 against 3 much more often than I'm able to do when I don't have this player. So I hope this didn't bore you. I hope I was like kind of clear with what I'm trying to say. With 2024, it was a functional room. And like the same you can say about this tight ends, like on an individual basis. Adam Troutman, unfortunately, this was the guy with like the most potential. It didn't pan out. Like he is solid player, nothing more. Like that's just it. Lucas Krull, it's like they know what they have in these guys. They have their roles, but neither of them like demands teams to like really focus. They will do their job. That's what they are expected. But that's pretty much it. So really, when you look at the playmakers that Bo Nix and Sean Payton had to work with, not really much there. But when you look at how they actually play, it was really clear that the system is bringing the kind of the best out of them, perhaps with exception of Troy Franklin out there. Now let's go towards the line that kind of makes this all possible as well, because for the system to work, I would say, I think it's always been a staple of Sean Payton. You have to have great O-lines, and he is really good picking the guys, developing them, etc., or bringing guys to develop them. And we will start with tackles in Mike McGlinchey and Garrett Bowles, and these two guys I have both marked as am I too low on them, because to me they had like very similar seasons to what they had in last year's, which to me kind of fits their grades. But just looking at what PFF has on them, and perhaps what a friend of mine who is a huge fan of Denver was telling me, perhaps I missed something. So I really need to come back to the drawing board over the summer, and when I will be rewatching the tape on Broncos, I will focus on these two guys specifically, because I might be too low on him, because they were really, really good this year. And you kind of probably need to put this into perspective of rookie QB. Losing a center, because they were cool with letting Lloyd Cushenberry go and getting substantial paid with the Titans, and they were like, we are not addressing the situation. And a lot of people were like, you have rookie QB, and who is your center? And they were like, well, we have Luke Wattenberg. And they were like, what? Luke Wattenberg? Who is this guy? And this guy is a former 5th rounder that did not really play almost like at all. I will give you guys a sample size on him. Not necessarily sample size, but in neither of his previous years he played over 250 snaps. And even when he was out there, he did not look good. So I was like, okay, good for you. But Sean Payton and offensive line, more often than not, this guy knows what he's doing. And Luke Wattenberg absolutely proved that he's not the problem. He is a solid starter. Like, is he next great center? Is he Creed Humphrey in the making? Hell no. But is he like 80% for what Lloyd Cushenberry was for them for $1 million a year? Hell yeah. Really solid player. We will see how his second year as a starter is going to go, because I cannot envision like him losing this job after what he showed year one. And now we are even going to switch to who I think is the best offensive lineman, and the third guy I have on my mark, because should I move Quinn Miners towards elite, I am really tempting to do so. I need to, I really felt like I don't need to rewatch this guy on an individual basis before I will do this series, because like I said, when I'm doing this, I'm going from like game tape. I watched all the games in 2024, but I did not necessarily rewatch them. I did not necessarily like focused on single player. That's for summer. Quinn was exceptional. Like, this O-line was really holding together, and Quinn was really great. And I'm a huge fan of Quinn Miners. I feel like he's going to end up an elite starter for me. I think it's about damn time for Quinn Miners to enter that category. But yeah, again, you will see. You need to watch a Denver Broncos really preview of 2025 that's going to come around September or June. And if I had to guess, I feel like Quinn Miners after the summer review is going to enter the elite category because he is playing like one of the top guards out there. And the fact that they were able to sign him to an extension that is worth only 18 million a year, it's just ridiculous. Like, that's an insane value. Like, when you compare it to like Robert Hunt, and I don't want to like throw shades at Robert Hunt, but this is freaking discount. Like, this guy should be worth at least around 25 million a year in the current card market. So absolutely insane value that they were able to get on Quinn Miners. And I think he's going to be a huge part of this team for the future. And it's good for them that their other guard, Ben Powers, who they actually also paying 18 million, which is crazy compared to Quinn Miners. It's not necessarily crazy towards like Ben Powers' abilities. Like, it's slightly overpay. I would say he's like more for like 13-14 million. But it's also like about his cap hit. He was actually originally signed to 13 million a year on a 4-year deal. So yeah, you know, that's where cap hit and let's say annual salary can be deceptive. And I was actually not looking. I was like, this guy is probably like worth 13 million. And so they are overpaying him, but they need to focus on the line. And then I look at his contract, and he's exactly worth 13 million a year annually, but not necessarily looking at his cap hit. Well, good for me that I at least know something. One last, I don't want to say criticism of this offense, but one last note that I need to make about Bo Nix is when you look at this, they did not use almost any of the backups. And once again, it's very rare for an offensive line to hold up the whole season as their intent to. And it could be a team. Like, how many times I will say this about a team that is in the playoffs, right? Right, Eagles? You know, it's really something that's not like supernatural that your 5 guys kind of hold, with exception of like 2-3 games here and there. And it's a huge freaking advantage because knowing what the guy next to is going to do, knowing how you are going to deal with stunts, etc., it's a huge advantage. Not to mention, like, on the individual basis, they're just like probably much better than their backups, right? So if in 2025 this offense does not look better or even good, it might be about, okay, suddenly we have some online issues, probably 2 injuries. Now the system cannot function properly. Bo Nix is pressured more than we would like. He's not able to handle it. It could be like that in 2025, but obviously I do not wish it to the Broncos. Now let's shift towards the defense. And here it's a kind of different approach. It's not like 5 guys that are always on the field. Here is much more about, we have a lot of guys that, again, we are going to put into the right spots due time. We start with Nick Bonito, for who it was yet another year of taking a massive step forward and potentially to be like low-end number 1 edge rusher for this team. He's not there yet. I would say like he's solid second piece that you should have. They don't necessarily have the number 1 edge in this team. They kind of have a lot of guys, not a guy. But Nick Bonito, if he takes yet another step, because like his former second rounder that in first year was dreadful, then he was good, and now he was kind of great. We'll see where it is towards the future. Next to him, Jonathan Cooper. You kind of know at this point what Jonathan Cooper is. Like, he pretty much performs like this across his whole career. He came in, he settled, and he's that. Like, he's a good player, not special one, not insane one. Perhaps there is an important starter in his future, but is he your next TJ Watt? Is he your Nick Bosa? It's not in him. I don't think there is even like Montez Sweat or guys like that I consider like low-end ones. but as your second piece, he is a very, very solid player. They've got something solid from Yona Ellis, as we talk about this rookie. Solid performance, not necessarily exceptional, but once again, this approach is much more about really putting the guys into the right spots and making system works. Obviously, this is a different system that they have with offense. And it's also like enhanced that you can do this when you have veterans like Zach Allen, like John Franklin Myers. I mean, veterans, like neither of them are 30s, but it feels like they are in the league like for so many years. Like, let me check on that one. How long they've been in the league. John, where are you? Here you are. It was just 6 seasons. It really felt like it's more than that with John and with Zach. Again, just 6 seasons. I mean, they're probably doing something right if I feel like they are in the league for like 8 years or 9. And they really freaking are. Zach Allen, like when you look at the PFF number, you are not getting the whole story with Zach Allen because you need to see snaps. Over 1,000 snaps for a defensive lineman, it's just freaking insane. Like, this is a huge credit towards his like body to be able to really play almost every snap. That's almost like unheard of. It's really, really insane. So the fact that on some snaps he is exhausted or looks exhausted, well, that's because he is, right? But he is still out there, and like, if he can on those like bad snaps be average, and on those good snaps he can be really, really good, that's what they have him do. So don't look at the PFF and tell me Zach Allen is not a great player. He is freaking great, and he gives you something that not many other linemen do, that he is really being able to play like 90% of the snaps every single day. That's freaking insane. Next to him, you have DJ Jones, kind of, again, like this big cork in the middle, really a guy that stops pretty much anything from happening. And he was able to get some nice pass rushing moves as well. John Franklin Myers is much more of this pass rush specialist, I would say. And he absolutely got what they traded him to do. I feel like they've traded him, for a 6th round pick from the Jets, where it felt like after Hassan Reddick, they wanted to give more opportunities to Will McDonald. There was not necessarily a spot for John Franklin Myers, and dude, like, he signed like 2 years, 15 millions. Wow, that seems like a bargain for what John Franklin Myers is. And like, huge kudos to him. He absolutely embraced this challenge, this opportunity, and he looked freaking good out there. And, you know, like I said, this is approach about a bunch of players. Perhaps, you know, Zach Allen is kind of the one exception. He really is out there pretty much all the freaking time. But other than that, they're really like swirling around. And they were able to find solid players with veteran Malcolm Roach, again, a guy that Sean Payton is familiar from his time with the Saints, and undrafted pickup with Dondre Tillman to really fill out the snaps and be meaningful out there. That's like, if you have solid backups, or good backups in this case, it actually matters, because you know, your starters don't feel like they need to absolutely outdo themselves every single snap. They can take a breather. They can be there for the most important snaps at the end of the game, whilst not feeling like anybody who comes after them is going to pretty much not make the end game snaps relevant, because they are going to get burned and they will allow big plays to happen. So, you know, having nice backups, especially in terms of defensive line, where it's like the most rotation, I would say, out of any other position. Perhaps like running backs, you can question. It's really, really important. And one, like, again, underestimated thing by this general management, and Sean Payton, I think, has a hand in this, that they do really, really well. What they also continue to do well is the linebacker room. And once again, it's not necessarily about having a great talent, especially when your main guy in Alex Singleton goes down. It's making, I don't want to be like bad to the guys, but It's making stuff workable despite not having a great assets to work with. And it continues to happen with this room specifically for the Broncos for several years, even before Sean Payton. It never felt like they had like this super talented, where it's like athletically gifted, superhuman beings as linebackers, but they were always able to get a good plays out of them. Here it was kind of reincarnation of Cody Barton in terms of what his career is. Like, I felt like he was kind of done after his stint with the Washington. And obviously, I know very well Cody Barton from his time with Seahawks, and like his draft did not necessarily ended up as well as we hoped. But then he goes to Washington and he looks even worse than he was with Seattle. And I'm like, okay, no, perhaps LB2 somewhere, LB3, okay, they could take a chance on him. Here he comes into a situation in which like he's expected to be LB2 next to Alex Singleton, but Singleton goes down. And suddenly it's kind of all on Cody Barton to be that actually veteran on this crew and give you a floor that you can count on. And like he's still banned in coverage, and a lot of teams were able to take advantage of that, but he was solid out there, very, very solid. So good for Cody, and we will see where he lands for next year, because this was a 1 year, very cheap type of a deal. Like how much did they pay him, Cody? 2.5 million. So that really tells you how the league valued Cody Barton before the season, and in terms of what like his market value should look like based on Spotrac. They say 6.6. I don't think that's definitely out of the window for Cody Barton, so good for him. And now towards what is next to offensive line, the biggest strength of this team, though here it's much more about two individuals. One is Brandon Jones, and when they signed him to 3 years, like to something around 20 million, a lot of guys, including me, was like, what are you doing? Like, you don't have money and you are spending this on Brandon Jones? What? Like, okay, he had kind of a breakout year last season, but like, you really Justin Simmons to pretty much spend the money on Brandon Jones? You really think this guy is better? Or like you feel like you can untap some unheard potential in him? Like, what are you doing? Well, they absolutely freaking knew what they were doing. They made him play much more of a free safety than he was playing with the Dolphins. And boy, oh boy, was it very unexpected, but very, very nice turnaround. Like, if he continues like that, he could end up being a lead starter, because he played like one of the best safeties out there. The track record for that is not there. It's kind of like slightly new position for him, because he was much more playing as a strong safety. So we need to like give there needs to be much more of a sample size before I am going like based on this season. I will disregard like what I saw 3 years prior or 4 years prior on Brandon, but this was good. This was really freaking good. He was very secure tackler. He was insane in coverage. Like, wow. What a find, and what a freaking bargain it seems to be right now. And when they like announced that they've also re-signed PJ Locke, a lot of people were like, oh, this is a steal. Like, he was on like what, 2-3 millions, something like that, like 2 years, 7 millions. Let me recheck that for you guys. PJ Locke, yeah, 2 years, 7 million, so 3.5 a year. It was like, oh my god, they stole value here, not with Brandon Jones. And yeah, they didn't. PJ Locke was playable, but like he was getting burned in coverage, and it's not like he added anything special in terms of his run defense as well. He missed a lot of tackles. He was not at the right places, and unfortunately for Denver, he did not emerge as a like really nice complementary piece to Brandon Jones. What was probably like expected. His first 2 years within the league, because he's an undrafted pickup, he was not playing much. When he was playing, he did not look good. But then year 3 arrived and he again was playing some snaps, but he actually looked really well in them. So last season, he got his opportunity and he played very solidly. Not necessarily as this potential whatever, but as solid player to really have. And they were like, I would argue that at that point of the time, 2 years, 7 millions, really felt like this could be a really nice deal for them. Unfortunately, this season he kind of looked like what he was year 1. And when you consider D-line playing very well, having Brandon Jones next to him, having Pat Certain in that secondary, you should not be so bad, considering like those guys demand attention, those guys like limit the field for you in terms of like what do you need to cover, because they are able to cover much more. And also with the D-line, they obviously limit the time that QB has to burn you. PJ Locke, he's definitely far from certain as a starter for next season. With Devon Key, he's yet another undrafted player from 2021. This was kind of his first chance. He played some solid snaps, but there's a reason why these are his first snaps in the NFL in 4 years since he's been like undrafted pickup. So is there something in him? Maybe, but he's far from certain to even making a roster next season. But I would say like with limited opportunity, he showed interesting promise. Like he did not let his chance slide. And now towards the corners and towards Defensive Player of the Year, Pat Surtain II. Like before the season, I was saying like there is Sauce Gardner and there is like the closest thing to him is probably Pat Surtain, but I don't feel like they are on the same level. Well, after this year, it might be just in reverse, because Sauce finally looked like a human out there, but Pat didn't. He again looked like a superhuman, and the fact that he just doesn't have like bad years. This is obviously his 4th season. Yeah, that's really like he had slight down year last year, but he's still like even in his down years, he's like top 7 corners in the league. I'm not sure that like Sauce based on this year was around that. We will see. But that was just insane. Like, was this necessarily like with the production the type of year that you would expect Defensive Player of the Year to have? I would say if Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson were on better teams with like better record and making playoffs, I would say Pat Surtain's DPOI would have been in more question. But here, I think like he absolutely deserves. He was excellent. He had production, he had coverage, he had every freaking thing. Next to him, Jaquan McMillan, Riley Moss, 2 young guys that you would hope that they will show something more than they necessarily did. Like again, they were solid, but you would hope for like stepping up, literally like improving, because they're young players. That's what you kind of always hope. Both of these guys looked worse than they did in their previous year, which is not the trajectory that you hope from your young guys. And neither of them, I would say, is certain to keep their starting job for next year. They could, because they are still on their rookie deals and there's still a lot of promise in them, and they were not like a burnt toast out there. But, perhaps you want something better next to Pat Surtain, because then you can really start to do some really, really funny business on the back end of your defense. Whilst now, it's like, okay, here exists Pat Surtain, we cannot throw it in there, but there are guys that we can take advantage of. And what would happen if there is probably not yet another Pat Surtain, but what if there is much more capable second wideout? And it's like, where are we going to throw the ball? Okay, so let's try it more in the middle. Oh, Brandon Jones is lurking there. Okay. So I guess we are running the ball, right? That's kind of like a little bit of jokes to end this defense. Which, like, again, it was really solid defense with some standout players like Patserton, like Zach Allen, like Brandon Jones. They really did exceptional job this season. And overall, this was very functional defense. When you look at this team, functional offense, functional defense, easier schedule than some other teams had, because they had like third team schedule from their own division. They were facing NFC South, which is probably like one of the two worst divisions in football. So, and they kind of got slightly lucky with Kansas not really playing for number 1 seed in that week 18 game. But at the end of the day, they were average to slightly above average team that justifiably, I would say, made the playoffs. Unfortunately, they could not match with Buffalo, but very, very nice season for them. With that being said, let's hand out some rewards. For drafted, it's going to be Bo Nix. I could have gone for Devon Valley, but I would guess that I would be called an infinite hater of this pick if I did that. I felt like with Devon, they stole a lot of value, but Bo Nix was definitely a draft hit for what they needed out of him, and he definitely exceeded my expectations year 1. In terms of draft blunder, it has to go to Oregon as well with Troy Franklin. I would say the door was freaking wide open. You have your QB, you have an opportunities with trade of Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick being released, and he just didn't grab it and didn't run away with it. Is his career gone for it? No. But, I would argue that this was probably the worst wide receiver core that Bo Nix is going to work with. And if you didn't make it during this time, how are you going to make it with probably some other guys arriving toward this room? In terms of their cornerstone, how could you not go for Pat Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year? Right now, I would say slightly edging number 1 corner overall in the league. And there's really not much you can say about Pat Surtain game that isn't excellent. Like his length, his speed, he's really even like a willing tackler, his hands, his IQ, everything is there. He's just an exceptional corner. And how much they paid him? 4 years, 96 minutes. I mean, it's probably still a bargain for a guy that's so freaking good. In terms of unsung hero, I have to give it to Brandon Jones, who really, I did not expect this out of him. They had a vision for him. They changed what he needs to do as a safety. He embraced that. It looked like, oh, maybe this is actually what I need to do, what I'm really great at. He was exceptional. And despite having slight liability in terms of his partner in crime as another safety in PJ Locke, he delivered. And whenever he was not on the field, because I feel like he missed 2 games in the middle. Yeah, he missed week 11 and 14. It was freaking noticeable that Brandon Jones, before the season, he would be like, oh, whatever. And I was like, oh my God, Brandon Jones is missing. That's really impact, and really a guy that I don't think you knew much about when he was signing for the Broncos. And I knew something about him, but I was not necessarily certain that he's going to be a good fit and a good player for them. So perhaps good for you, really coming to watch him year 5, and now why is this guy not even higher in your grade? I mean, watch his tape specifically in the first 3 years, he did not look this well. In terms of flop, it was not necessarily easy picking. It's with the teams that making playoffs, it's much more likely that they don't necessarily have a player that was hugely underperforming. Though I would say for PJ Locke, for where the expectations from me and from overall the community that I've listened to and watched, and guys that really watch Broncos, it felt like he is poised to have yet another semi-breakout year, really to push himself towards conversation of a good starter and really solidify himself as a starter for years to come. It did not happen. He was bad. He was getting picked apart, especially in coverage. So he needs to get better, otherwise I don't think he's going to survive next year as a starter. With that being said, with the awards being handed out, let's look at this franchise, where they are at as of right now. Sean Payton, head coach, I pushed him towards an A. I was lower on him because he didn't coach for a long time, and last year was like kind of weird, I would say, with Russell Wilson, but he clearly is still a genius out there, and it might not be past him to even move to A+ territory. I felt like he did really, really good job with the Broncos this year. In terms of 2024, A-. I don't feel like there is too many stuff that could have gone better for the Broncos. Perhaps you can name PJ Locke could have been better, Troy Franklin. Not everything was absolutely perfect, but making it to playoffs, given the circumstances where it was 50 million of dead cap hit for Russell Wilson, not necessarily having a bunch of picks in previous drafts, rookie QB, yeah, really, really good season. With a QB, 2 pluses, and here the 2 pluses are much more for this idea of Bo Nix on a rookie deal and really building the team around him, because that I feel like could be an insane value for this team. That this guy, pretty much from year one or halfway through year one, he's going to play as 20th best QB in the league. Essentially, if he moves towards 16, 14, that's really great, and paying nothing for that, or almost nothing, is really nice. Again, if the idea with the Broncos is he is next but Mahomes, he can compete with these guys in the future and really go head to head with them, and we will most likely resign him towards a bigger contract, that's where I will be worried. And if in 2 years he is what he is, what I believe he's going to be, and now the talks are going to be the same as are with Brock Purdy, as well with Tua, as we need to extend this guy. The only question is how much. I will be pushing really hard back on, but for where they are right now, for what they are paying, they are getting an insane value. In terms of hot seat, this is not one only because Sean can be a little bit hot-headed at times, so that could be sometimes an issue. And also he's not the youngest guy, so there could be some stuff about that, but I really feel like his job is safe and he went about it the right way. Beside not the situation with Russell, because I felt like the divorce kind of was inevitable, but the way they handled the situation. In terms of finances, to be neutral is actually a huge win for them, because with Russell there was 80 million in terms of that cap hit, and they really did not look like a healthy franchise. Right now they have 40 million free to spend in this offseason. They are not necessarily, they do not have money pushed down the line heavily. They have a solid some of the solid contracts made, Quinn Minus. I feel like he's an insane value for what you are paying him. I would argue that Pat Surtain is also a value. You have a reliable QB on a rookie contract, so this finances, despite still 30 millions on the book for Russell Wilson dead cap, you have not made re-signings, so that's where 40 millions might look like a lot, but 10 millions goes towards draft guys, and you have not re-signed a single player this offseason, so it's not it's a great situation, but it's not bad. Strength, I went for lines, and it really fits free O-line, D-line, but also having everybody in line. It really feels like they are a coherent unit, really systemized and really put into the right guys into right places. And perhaps, what this offseason could be about and what this stuff could be about. Well, I have right guys in the right places, but those guys are limited. Perhaps if I can bring yet another chess piece and again put him into his right place and replace this guy, well, suddenly the system looks much better. In terms of division, I struggle between 2 minuses and 1, because Raiders are you don't know what comes with them, and this was obviously before Geno Smith trade, which I would say it would cemented this as a clear -2, because I feel strongly about Geno being a capable starter, but you have Justin Herbert, you have Patrick Mahomes. Like, that fucking hurts. Also, this is one of the two divisions that had 3 teams in the playoffs. Yeah, it's not the worst situation. Like there could, I would say that's probably when you look at this as Raiders, this makes it much harder. Or if you look from perspective of like the Bears, and you have to face fucking Packers, Lions, and Vikings. These are harder situations, or like from the Browns perspective. But still, this is one of the toughest situation in terms of, from my perspective, how I look at my division. So with that being said, how could the roster shape up for 2025? I think O-line is freaking set. I don't expect them to make any changes. They are paying their guys. Everybody is paid. Everybody is like, I think, paid for even the next year. The only Luke Wattenberg, but I feel like Luke is the only one that doesn't have a contract for next season. We'll see if they like try to go bargain on this and try to re-sign him before the season starts and kind of project him to develop, or are they going to be like, okay, let's play it out and we will see after the season. For the next guys, I don't really feel like there is any reason to move on. I don't think you move on from Bo Nix as well. In terms of playmakers, here is where the situation is much more interesting, because I really feel like whilst I do understand that the guys were making their job, doing their job on high level, but it was high level for them. I don't feel like they have difference maker as tight end, as a running back, and also I feel like they can use some help with wide receiver. I think Devon Valley, Marvin Mims, and Cortland Sutton works very well as a trio. So I will not be shocked if, wide receiver 2, is kind of Devon Valley. They go with Marvin Mims, they go with Troy Franklin, and I'm like, okay with this room. But I would be super shocked if they did not address at least 2 of these 3 positions with some major capital. Whether we talk about free agents or draft, I do expect them to go for either wide receiver 2 or even 1, to put Cortland into a more beneficial role for him even. And number 1 tight end and their workhorse running back. In terms of backups, I do expect that's probably more appropriate role for Adam Chapman. I think Audric Estime, as your backup RB, works for cheap. I don't necessarily feel like he doesn't have potential to be a good back, but he didn't necessarily show it year 1 with opportunity that was out there. Troy Franklin, like I said, the same. It's pretty much the same to Audric. Alex Forsyth, kind of experienced, a veteran that they have. Not like experience. I mean, he's 26, but he was like, with Alex Forsyth, this is only his 3rd year, so when I'm saying experience, it kind of looks bad. But with Alex Forsyth, I feel like the thinking is, and was even back in the day, because he was a 7th rounder, we are getting an older prospect in which we do not believe that he has a starter upside, pretty much, end of the sentence. But he should be very nice floor backup for us. 4 years for cheap. Yet another smart decision. I really applaud. Everybody's saying when 5th round, 6th round, 7th round arrives, you need to take chance on the guys. You can take punts. I'm like, how about if you just took guys that are going to be with really high floor and just make them super freaking cheap backups? Once upon 10 picks, it works out that the guy is going to fly up. But, if I get 6 really good backups that are worth $1 million a year for next 4 years, that's freaking awesome value. So I feel like a lot of people underestimate the situation, or they are trying to go for a home run and really be like, oh my God, we found this guy in the 6th round. Well, how often that happens, point A. Point B, if it happens, it usually takes some time. It's not like he absolutely emerges year 1. And then, very soon after that, you have to actually pay him what he's worth. But I really feel like that's one of underestimated situation. The second thing, is obviously taking chances of on players that perhaps have like injury history, because for example, like Puka Nacua, based on his play quality, he was not supposed to be out there so late, but there was obviously huge worries about like, can he play? So I do understand when you take these punts, but other than that, I would say take really kind of older prospects, guys that you can trust that they can play, and most likely you just want them as your very cheap backups for years to come. I would really like a roster build like that if I was a GM. Now let's shift towards D-line and defense overall. I feel like they are pretty much set. With how they use their fronts, like you can question whether John Franklin Myers should be here, but this is how really like fits this the most. So like they will probably have much more like their fronts will look differently, but these are kind of their four best guys for their duty, and they look solid. I think with Nick Bonito, you still have a potential stud in the making, not necessarily star or the superstar, but very solid guys. In terms of linebackers, like they don't have Cody Barton signed for next year. I kind of expected them to bring him back, but perhaps with the way they are able to like handle linebacker situations and already paying Alex Singleton not pennies, it's $7 million a year. Perhaps we won't see Cody Barton and they will just fill this room with someone cheap, as they usually tend to do. In terms of secondary, I think there are three guys that are certain. It's Brandon Jones, it's Pat Sutton, I would say Riley Moss. With Jaquan McMillan, like you can say that he probably is going to end up being at least like the first man in, but he did not necessarily made it super certain that that's going to be the case. But yeah, I think he probably should have been out there. So I'm sorry. I think Jaquan McMillan should be in this situation. I feel like I perhaps like if he's not here, he definitely should be here. So this is probably like some type of mistake on my part. With Justin Sternett, you can get him for cheap back, I believe. If not, once again, like they might really feel like, we can work with pretty much anyone, give us $1 million player, and we will make him a solid linebacker. So there is Jaquan missing. So they pretty much have like four pieces that should be here, and that should be kind of ready. Though I do expect them to try and look for a better player next to Pat Sutton to really make this secondary something that teams are scared of. With that said, this is the end of this episode. It was surprisingly fun talking about Broncos, though like I'm by my friends. Like it's like crazy. I don't have like here in Czech Republic, it's not like everybody's watching NFL. But like I have two friends that are watching NFL quite heavily. Like I have more like multiple of them, but two guys probably watch it the most. Both of them are Broncos fans, so kind of sparked up the rivalry. Also because like I became a Seahawks fan after they demolished Broncos. Don't call me Goal Hunter if you have not seen the episode with the Seahawks where I explain my journey. So be sure to watch that before you make that bad word about me, because I don't like it. Or like jumping on the bandwagon and stuff like that. With that being said, it was kind of a fun episode. I felt like a lot of the stuff that I was not certain about with the Broncos looked very well year one. Am I like super stoked about their future yet? No. And perhaps, that's going to be for the best, and Broncos will once again make me look like someone that doesn't understand what he's talking about. Or perhaps they, with tougher schedule and, perhaps not as great of a like injury backlog, because they did not really miss anybody across this whole season for like longer periods of time. They will regress towards like being slightly under average team. We'll see. I'll let you guys be the judge how I did on this episode. Thank you very much for watching, for listening. If you like this, please leave a like. It's a very nice way how you support me. Leave a comment. It helps as well. Thank you and see you next time. Bye bye.